"You're not coming to the wedding. We've already decided," my daughter Mia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face carefully blank as I stood in her pristine living room. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I had driven across town that Sunday afternoon, excited to show her the mother of the bride dress I'd finally found after weeks of searching. The pale blue fabric complemented my silver hair, and for once, I thought I looked nice enough to stand beside my beautiful daughter on her special day. But the dress bag remained zipped, draped over my arm as Mia delivered her verdict so casually, as if she were declining a dinner invitation rather than barring her own mother from her wedding. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. I've already." John, her fiancé, stepped forward from where he'd been leaning against the kitchen counter. At 38, he was 10 years older than Mia, with the kind of polished charm that had always set my teeth on edge. "Barbara," he said, using my first name, as he always did, never Mom or even Mrs. Reynolds. "We're keeping the ceremony intimate, just immediate family and close friends." "I'm her mother," I said, the obvious fact hanging in the air between us. "How much more immediate can family be?" Mia sighed, exchanging a look with John that made my stomach tighten. It was a look I'd seen too many times over the past 2 years, a silent communication that always seemed to end with me being pushed further from my daughter's life. "Mom, you know how things have been between us. We want our wedding day to be perfect. No tension, no drama." When have I ever caused drama? My voice cracked. In 30 years of being Mia's mother, through raising her alone after her father died when she was just 4, through working 2 jobs to put her through college, through supporting every dream and ambition she'd ever had, when had I ever been the source of drama? "Let's not do this," Mia said, her tone suddenly tired. "John's parents are hosting. They've paid for everything. They have a vision for how the day should be." The unspoken truth hung in the air. His parents had money. Old money. The kind that came with a sprawling estate in Vermont where the wedding would be held. The kind that made my teacher's pension look like pocket change. "I see," I said, though I didn't, not really. I turned to leave, dignity the only thing I had left. "Mom?" Mia called after me, a hint of something, guilt, regret, in her voice. "You understand, right? It's just one day. One day. My only child's wedding." The milestone I'd dreamed of sharing with her since I first held her in my arms. I didn't answer. I simply walked out, got into my 12-year-old Toyota, and drove home in silence, the dress bag on the passenger seat beside me like a ghost of what should have been. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop open, my hands trembling slightly as I navigated to the airline website. The confirmation for 2 first-class tickets to Bali stared back at me. Mia's dream honeymoon destination, a surprise gift I'd been planning for years. I'd started the savings fund when she was in college, putting aside a little each month from my teacher's salary, sometimes skipping meals or forgoing new clothes to add more. With 3 steady clicks, I canceled the tickets. Next, I logged into my bank account and froze the special travel fund I'd established for them, $32,000 that represented years of careful saving, extra summer school teaching jobs, and the proceeds from selling my mother's antique jewelry. They didn't want me at their wedding? Fine. They wouldn't get the honeymoon I'd sacrificed to provide either. As I closed the laptop, a photograph on my refrigerator caught my eye. Mia at her high school graduation, her arms wrapped around my neck, both of us beaming. I remembered that day so clearly. How proud I'd been watching her accept her diploma. How we'd celebrated with a tiny cake I'd stayed up late to bake because we couldn't afford the fancy one from the bakery. When had I lost her? When had my bright, loving daughter turned into this stranger who could smile while breaking my heart? The change had been gradual, I realized, starting around the time she met John 2 years ago. At first, it was small things: missed Sunday, dinners, shortened phone calls, a new critical edge to her comments about my clothes, my house, my life. Then came the holidays at his family's home instead of mine, the vacations I heard about only afterward through social media. I made my way to the bedroom and opened my closet, pushing aside hangers until I found the box I was looking for. Inside was the silver locket her father had given me the day Mia was born. I'd planned to give it to her on her wedding day, a piece of the father she barely remembered to carry with her into her new life. Now, as I held it in my palm, all I could think was, would she even have wanted it? Or would it have been just another embarrassing reminder of her ordinary roots? I sank onto the edge of my bed, finally allowing the tears to come. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation. This was about the slow, painful reality that my daughter, the child I had centered my entire life around, had decided I wasn't good enough for her new world. And the most painful part? I wasn't even surprised. I'd seen it coming for months, in 100 small rejections that led to this final devastating one. That night, I cried until there were no tears left. And then, in the quiet darkness of my bedroom, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time I let Mia make me feel less than. The last time I silently accepted being pushed aside. She may not want me at her wedding, but she would soon discover what it truly meant to cut me out of her life. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. 3 days after Mia's rejection, I found myself sitting on my living room floor surrounded by photo albums. Outside, spring rain tapped against the windows of my small bungalow, mirroring the tears that occasionally slipped down my cheeks despite my best efforts. "Oh, Barb," my friend Elaine said, handing me a mug of tea as she carefully stepped around the sea of photographs. "You're torturing yourself with these." I traced my finger over a picture of 5-year-old Mia on her first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed smile beaming at the camera, her tiny hand gripping mine. "I'm trying to understand when it all changed," I said quietly. "When I became someone she could cut out of her life so easily." Elaine sighed, lowering herself onto the couch behind me. At 68, she'd been my friend since we started teaching at Roosevelt Elementary together 30 years ago. She'd witnessed every step of my journey with Mia, the triumphs and struggles of single motherhood after James died, leaving me a widow at 35. "It's not you who changed, honey. It's her. Or rather, it's the influence of that man and his family." I flipped to another page, Mia's high school graduation. I'd scrimped and saved to buy her the pearl earrings she wore in the photo, working extra tutoring sessions for months. Did I make it too easy for her to take me for granted? I wondered aloud. Did I give too much? Elaine snorted. "That's what mothers do, Barbara. We give." The question is why she started thinking it was okay to just take. My hand stilled over a more recent photo, Mia's 28th birthday dinner, about 6 months before she met John. Her eyes shone as she hugged me, the resemblance between us unmistakable, despite her dark hair against my silver. We'd been so close then. She'd call me almost daily, drop by on weekends, bring me little gifts, just because. Then John Whitfield entered her life, and everything shifted. "I sold my house," I said suddenly, looking up at Elaine. The confession had been sitting heavy in my chest for months. Elaine nearly spilled her tea. "What? This house? When?" I shook my head. "Not this one. My mother's house in Lakeview, the one I inherited. I've been renting it out since Mom died. It was worth quite a bit. The neighborhood got popular." Understanding dawned in Elaine's eyes. "The honeymoon fund." I nodded, gathering photographs. Into a neat pile, needing to occupy my hands. I sold it last year when they got engaged. The rental income was part of my retirement plan, but I shrugged. Mia always talked about wanting a honeymoon in Bali. First-class tickets, luxury resorts. I wanted to give her that dream. "Oh, Barbara," Elaine whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "It was going to be my surprise wedding gift. Now I don't know what I'm going to do with the money." I laughed hollowly. "Buy myself a trip to Bali, maybe?" Elaine set her mug down with a definitive thud. "You should tell her. Tell her what you've done, what you were planning." I shook my head firmly. "No, absolutely not." "Why the hell not? It might wake her up to how she's treating you." "Because I don't want her back out of guilt or obligation," I said quietly. "I don't want to be the mother who has to buy her daughter's love or respect. If she only wants me around because of what I can give her materially, then I don't want to be around at all." Elaine fell silent, watching me as I continued organizing photos, setting aside the ones that hurt too much to look at right now. "When did John start turning her against you?" she finally asked. I considered the question carefully. It wasn't immediate. At first, he was perfectly pleasant. A bit condescending, maybe, but I wrote that off as nervousness. I paused, remembering. The real change came after he took her to meet his parents in Vermont. The weekend visit had stretched to a week. When Mia returned, something fundamental had shifted. She started making comments about how quaint my home was, how simple my life. She began mentioning things John's mother would never do, or how the Whitfields handle things. "His parents come from old money," I explained to Elaine. "They own some kind of publishing empire. Their house has a name, not just an address, and they made it very clear that their son was making a generous choice by marrying someone like Mia." "Someone like Mia?" Elaine echoed incredulously. "Someone whose mother is a public school teacher. Someone who doesn't summer in the Hamptons. Or ski in Aspen." I smiled bitterly. "Someone normal." Elaine's face flushed with anger. "And Mia just accepted that? After everything you sacrificed to give her a good life?" I closed the photo album in my lap, suddenly exhausted. She more than accepted it. She embraced it, started working to erase any trace of her humble beginnings, including me. The truth hung heavy between us. My daughter wasn't just excluding me from her wedding. She was excluding me from the narrative of her new life, where having a mother who taught third grade for 30 years didn't fit the image she wanted to project. "Have you tried talking to her directly? Really telling her how you feel?" Elaine asked gently. Every attempt ends the same way. She gets defensive. John intervenes. And suddenly, I'm the unreasonable one for having feelings. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. The last time, John actually suggested I might need therapy to deal with my attachment issues. Elaine muttered something unflattering about where John could put his suggestions. I laughed despite myself, then grew serious again. "The wedding is in 18 days. I've spent 30 years being the mother who always puts her daughter first. Now I need to be the woman who puts herself first." "And what does that woman want to do?" Elaine asked. I looked around at the scattered remnants of Mia's childhood, the piano recital programs I'd saved, the handmade Mother's Day cards, the photographs documenting every milestone. 30 years of motherhood reduced to paper memories while my actual daughter slipped away. "She wants to stop disappearing," I said firmly. "And she's going to start by showing Mia exactly what she's thrown away." Later that night, after Elaine left, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. I hadn't really looked at myself, truly looked, in a long time. The woman staring back had silver hair cut in a practical bob, lines around her eyes from years of smiling and crying, and a softness to her body that spoke of comfort rather than glamour. John's mother, Caroline Whitfield, was probably 5 years older than me but looked 10 years younger. She had the preserved beauty that came from expensive skincare, regular cosmetic procedures, and never having to worry about money a day in her life. Was that why Mia had chosen her new family over me? Was I simply not polished enough for the life she wanted? I opened my jewelry box and took out the silver locket I'd planned to give Mia. Inside was a tiny photo of James holding newborn Mia in the hospital. He'd died when she was 4. A sudden heart attack that shattered our world overnight. Mia had few memories of him. I'd kept him alive for her through stories and photographs. Now I wondered if those stories had been enough. If maybe I'd failed her by not somehow giving her the kind of life that would have made her proud to be my daughter. The thought made anger flare in my chest, surprising in its intensity. No, I had been a good mother. I had loved her completely, supported her unconditionally, sacrificed endlessly. If that wasn't enough for her, the failing was hers, not mine. I put the locket away and picked up my phone, my finger hovering over Mia's number. What would I even say? Please don't shut me out. Please remember who you are and where you came from. Instead, I set the phone down and walked to the spare bedroom that had once been Mia's. I opened the closet and pulled out the blue dress I'd intended to wear to her wedding. Carefully, I hung it on the back of the door and studied it. It was a perfectly nice dress. Not designer, certainly, but elegant in its simplicity. A dress that had made me feel beautiful when I tried it on. I wouldn't be wearing it to Mia's wedding. But perhaps there would be another occasion, another celebration. One where I was valued for exactly who I was. As I turned away from the dress, my phone rang. My heart leapt, hoping against hope it might be Mia having second thoughts. But the screen showed a different name. Margaret Wilson, my elderly neighbor from across the street. "Barbara," she said when I answered, her voice trembling with age but sharp with purpose. "I need to talk to you about your Mia, and that fiancé of hers. There's something you should know. I never intended to go to the church that day. Yet there I was, parked across the street in my Toyota, watching guests in colorful spring dresses and tailored suits stream through the heavy wooden doors of St. Andrew's Episcopal. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white, and I forced myself to breathe slowly, fighting the tightness in my chest. From this distance, I could see the white roses and baby's breath adorning the entrance. The uniformed valets parking luxury cars. The photographer directing the wedding party for pre-ceremony shots on the church steps. Mia would be inside already, being buttoned into her dress, surrounded by bridesmaids and John's mother Caroline, who had undoubtedly taken over the mother of the bride duties that should have been mine. "This is pathetic, Barbara," I whispered, to myself, but I couldn't seem to turn the key in the ignition and drive away. A knock on my passenger window nearly gave me a heart attack. I turned to see Margaret Wilson's lined face peering in at me, her silver hair perfectly set despite the spring breeze. At 82, my neighbor still insisted on walking 2 miles every day, come rain or shine. I rolled down the window, mortification washing over me. "Margaret, Unlock the door, dear," she interrupted, already reaching for the handle. Too stunned to refuse, I pressed the unlock button. Margaret slid into the passenger seat with surprising grace for a woman her age, arranging her lilac cardigan around her. "I thought that might be you," she said, settling her handbag on her lap. "I was on my constitutional when I spotted your car." I couldn't meet her eyes. "I know how this looks." "It looks like a mother who misses her daughter," Margaret said simply. No judgment, no pity, just a statement of fact. We sat in silence for a moment, watching more guests arrive. A sleek black car pulled up, and a distinguished silver-haired couple emerged. John's parents, I assumed, though I'd only seen them in photographs Mia had shown me in the early days of her relationship, before I became persona non grata. "Did you know?" Margaret said suddenly. "That young man came to see me last month?" I turned to her, surprised. "John? Why would he visit you? Margaret's eyes, faded with age but still sharp with intelligence, fixed on me. He was asking questions about you. Very specific questions. A chill ran through me. What kind of questions? About your finances, primarily. Whether you owned your home outright. If you had family money. Margaret's mouth tightened. He presented it as concern for Mia's mother, but there was nothing kind in his eyes. I remembered what Margaret had said on the phone 2 weeks ago, that there was something I should know about John. We'd arranged to talk the following day, but she'd called to cancel, saying she wasn't feeling well. I'd been so consumed with my own hurt that I hadn't followed up. "Margaret, what's going on?" she sighed, her gnarled hands twisting the strap of her handbag. "I've lived on our street for 53 years, Barbara. I knew your mother, God rest her soul. I watched you grow up, get married, have Mia. I've seen how hard you've worked, especially after James died. That doesn't explain why John was asking. About my finances. I'm getting to that." She turned in her seat to face me more directly. "Last summer, I overheard him and Mia arguing in your front yard. I was watering my hydrangeas. You know they grow right along the fence line." I nodded, trying to remember if Mia had mentioned any significant disagreement with John. Nothing came to mind. He was pressuring her to ask you for money, a substantial amount. When she refused, he became quite agitated, saying something about debts coming due. My stomach dropped. Debts? What kind of debts? He didn't specify. But he said, and I quote, "Your mother's sitting on a gold mine with that Lakeview property. She doesn't need 2 houses." Margaret's eyes held mine. That's when I realized he'd been researching your assets. The Lakeview house. The one I'd sold to fund their honeymoon. A honeymoon they now wouldn't be taking, at least not on my dime. "Did Mia know I sold it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Margaret shook her head. "Not based on their conversation. She kept saying she wouldn't ask you to sell property that had been in the family for generations just because he'd made some bad investments. Bad. Investments." The words echoed in my mind, pieces suddenly clicking into place. John's interest in my financial situation, the increasing pressure from Mia over the past year to simplify my life by selling my mother's house. The way John had begun dropping hints about how I should enjoy my retirement instead of managing rental property. They hadn't known I'd already sold it. That I'd liquidated a significant asset for their benefit. "There's more," Margaret said gently. "After that argument, I made it my business to learn what I could about your future son-in-law. My grandson works in finance in Boston. He made some discreet inquiries." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to me. "John Whitfield has been sued 3 times by former business partners. He's burned through most of his trust fund on failed ventures. And according to Peter, he's been borrowing heavily from some rather unsavory characters to maintain appearances." I stared at the paper in my hand, a printout of what appeared to be court records and news clippings. "Does Mia know any of this?" "I doubt she knows the extent of it, but she knows enough to be concerned based on that argument." Margaret placed her weathered hand over mine. "Barbara, I believe he's marrying her to access her future inheritance, which he assumes includes your properties." The irony might have made me laugh if it wasn't so painful. John was marrying my daughter for money he thought she would inherit from me, the mother he'd worked so hard to excise from their lives. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, looking up at the church where my daughter was about to pledge her life to a man who saw her as a meal ticket. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Margaret said simply. "And because that young man nearly knocked me down on my own porch when I refused to tell him about your finances. Only my walking stick saved me from a nasty fall." Anger flared in, my chest hot and sudden. "He could have hurt you." "I've survived worse," Margaret said with a dismissive wave, "but it showed me his true character. The kind of man who would intimidate an elderly woman is not the kind of man who should be marrying your daughter." I looked back at the church, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this information? Storm into the church and object to the marriage like in some dramatic movie scene? Mia wouldn't believe me. She'd see it as another attempt to control her life, to sabotage her happiness. I can't stop this wedding, I said finally. She's made her choice. Margaret nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes all we can do is stand ready to catch our children when they fall. And they always fall, Barbara. Sooner or later. She patted my hand one last time, then opened the car door. I'm going home to make a cup of tea. You're welcome to join me when you're ready. As I watched her slowly make her way down the sidewalk, a thought occurred to me. I couldn't, stop this wedding. But perhaps there was something else I could do. Something that might eventually save my daughter from the trap she was walking into, even if she currently had no desire to be saved. I started the car, my decision made. I wouldn't be watching my daughter get married today. Instead, I would be preparing for what came after, when she discovered exactly what kind of man she had married, and exactly what kind of mother she had rejected. 3 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang at 11:43 p.m. I was already in bed reading a novel Elaine had recommended to keep my mind off things. When I saw Mia's name on the screen, my heart skipped. This was the first contact since before the wedding. I answered with a measured, "Hello," fighting to keep my voice neutral. "Mom?" Mia's voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "Are you awake?" "I'm awake," I said, sitting up straighter against my pillows. "What's wrong?" There was a long pause, just her breathing on the other end. Then, "Can I come over, please?" I hesitated only a moment. "Of course." 40 minutes later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I nearly gasped. Mia stood on my porch, her face blotchy from crying, wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. Nothing like the polished image she'd cultivated since meeting John. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She walked past me without a word, the familiar scent of her shampoo stirring memories I'd been trying to suppress. In the living room, she stopped suddenly, staring at the photo albums still stacked on my coffee table from weeks ago. I hadn't had the heart to put them away. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, unsure how to navigate this unexpected visit. She shook her head, finally, turning to face me. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hung between us, loaded with potential meanings. "Tell you what, Mia?" "About the honeymoon," she said, her voice breaking. "The tickets to Bali, the travel fund, all of it." I exhaled slowly, moving to sit in my armchair. "How did you find out?" "We went to the airport today. Our flight was supposed to be tonight." Mia sank onto my couch, looking smaller than I remembered. "John said you had arranged everything as a wedding gift, that it was all taken care of." I felt a sharp twist of anger. "He told you I had arranged your honeymoon?" Mia nodded miserably. "He's been saying for months that you wanted to do this for us, that it was your way of showing support even though you—" She trailed off. "Even though I wasn't invited to the wedding," I finished for her. She winced but didn't deny it. When we got to the check-in counter, there was no reservation, no tickets, nothing. Her voice hardened slightly. "John insisted there must be a mistake, that you must have canceled them out of spite. Of course he would blame me. And you believed that?" "I didn't know what to believe. You and John have never gotten along, and after we told you about the wedding—" "After you told me I wasn't welcome at my only daughter's wedding," I corrected quietly. Mia had the grace to look ashamed. "Yes. After that, I thought maybe you were angry enough to do something like this." "So why are you here, Mia? To accuse me of ruining your honeymoon?" She looked down at her hands. "We went to the bank after leaving the airport. John said we could use the travel fund you'd set up to book new tickets." I watched her carefully. "And?" And the banker said there was no fund under my name, or John's. He said there had been, but it was closed 3 weeks ago. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. Right after I told you about the wedding. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. Mom, I need to know the truth. Were there ever tickets to Bali? Was there really a travel fund? For a moment, I considered lying. It would be easier to let her believe I'd made the whole thing up, that John had been mistaken rather than deliberately deceptive. But I was done hiding the truth to spare other people's feelings. Yes, I said simply. I booked first-class tickets to Bali months ago, and I started a travel fund when you were still in college. I sold your grandmother's house in Lakeview last year to make sure you'd have the honeymoon of your dreams. Mia's eyes widened. You sold Grandma's house? But you loved that house. You always said you were saving it for retirement. I loved you more, I said quietly. At least I thought I did. Tears welled in her eyes. Then why did you cancel everything? Why do you think, Mia? My voice was steadier than I expected. You made it very clear I wasn't part of your life anymore. Why would I give you a gift worth tens of thousands of dollars when you couldn't even find room for me at your wedding? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because I've been trying to understand for weeks. Mia wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood, self that my heart ached. John said. He said it would be easier for everyone, that his parents had certain expectations, and you might feel uncomfortable, that you wouldn't enjoy yourself among people like them. People like them, I repeated, flatly. Rich people, she clarified, having the decency to look embarrassed. John said you'd feel out of place, that it would be a kindness to spare you that. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. And you believed that? That I would rather be excluded entirely than potentially feel a little awkward? I don't know what I believed anymore, she whispered. Everything's so confusing. John keeps telling me one thing, but then I find out something else is true. Like tonight. I leaned forward. What happened tonight, Mia? Why are you really here, honey? Took a shuddering breath. After we left the bank, John was furious. He started accusing me of hiding money from him, saying I must have known about the fund being closed. When I said I didn't, She trailed off, her hand unconsciously going to her wrist. Cold dread washed over me. Did he hurt you? No, not really. He just grabbed my arm. He was upset. I got up and moved to sit beside her on the couch, gently, taking her hand and pushing up her sleeve. Dark bruises were forming on her wrist, the unmistakable pattern of fingerprints. This is not what being upset looks like, Mia. This is abuse. She pulled her arm back. It's not like that. He's never done anything like this before. He's just under a lot of pressure. What kind of pressure? I asked, thinking of what Margaret had told me about John's financial troubles. Mia hesitated. He's having some business issues, investments that didn't work out, he thought. She paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. He thought, your mother's money would solve his problems, I finished for her. Her eyes met mine, startled. How did you know? Margaret Wilson overheard you two arguing last summer. About him wanting you to ask me to sell the Lakeview house. Mia's face crumpled. Oh God, I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant for any of this to happen. I loved him. I thought he loved me. And now I don't know what to think. When the banker told us the fund had been closed, he mentioned that John had tried to access it 3 weeks ago. Before the wedding. Before you closed it. She looked at me, realization dawning in her eyes. John knew about the fund all along. He just didn't tell me. Because he wanted the money, not the honeymoon, I said gently. Mia's phone buzzed on the coffee table. John's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it, her expression a mixture of fear and confusion. "You don't have to answer," I told her. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't know what to do. We've only been married 3 weeks. I can't just—" "You can just," I said firmly. "You can do whatever you need to do to be safe." The phone stopped buzzing, then immediately started again. Mia picked it up with a shaking hand and turned it off completely. "I need some time to think," she said. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Of course," I said, relief washing over me. It was a small step, but an important one. "You can stay as long as you need to." As I got sheets and a blanket for the couch, Mia wandered over to the photo albums on the coffee table. She opened one, her finger tracing over a photograph of the two of us at the beach when she was about 7. "I remember this day," she said softly. "You took off work, even though we needed the money, because I was so desperate to see the ocean. You built a sandcastle so big you could sit inside it," I recalled, smiling at the memory. "You were a good mom," Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know why I let John convince me otherwise." I set the blankets down and sat beside her, allowing myself to put an arm around her shoulders. To my surprise, she leaned into me. "I think," I said carefully, "that people like John are very good at finding the small cracks in our relationships and widening them until they become chasms. But chasms can be bridged if both people are willing to try." Mia looked up at me, her eyes red but clearer than they'd been all evening. "I'd like to try," she said, "if you'll let me." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The pounding on my front door started at 6:47 the next morning. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint my small backyard in shades of gold. Mia was still asleep on the couch, exhausted from a night of sporadic tears and hesitant confessions. I rushed to the door before the noise could wake her, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. John stood on my porch, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes bloodshot. When I cracked the door open, keeping the chain in place, I caught the unmistakable smell of alcohol. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice just shy of a shout. "Lower your voice," I said firmly. "You'll wake the neighbors." He glared at me through the narrow opening. "I know she's here. Her car is in your driveway." His hand pressed against the door, as if testing whether he could force it open. "I need to talk to my wife." "She doesn't want to talk to you right now, John." His face contorted with anger. "You don't get to decide that. You've been trying to come between us from the beginning." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of his accusation. "I think you've done a fine job of that all on your own." "Just get Mia," he hissed. "Or I swear to God You'll what?" I interrupted, my voice icy calm. "Break down my door? Add another assault charge to your growing list of problems?" He blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the bruises on my daughter's arm," I said, my grip tightening on the doorknob. "And I know about your financial troubles. The lawsuits from your former business partners. The loans from people who don't send polite letters when payments are late." His expression shifted from anger to calculation, a change that sent a chill down my spine. "Mia's been telling you stories," he said, forcing a laugh. "She gets emotional, exaggerates things. You know how she is." "Actually, I didn't hear it from Mia," I said. "I have other sources, more reliable ones." Before he could respond, I heard movement behind me. I turned to see Mia standing in the hallway, wrapped in the blanket I'd given her last night, her face pale but resolute. "It's okay, Mom," she said quietly. "I can handle this." I hesitated, torn between wanting to protect her and respecting her agency. Finally, I nodded and stepped aside, though I didn't close the door. If John tried anything, I wanted witnesses. Mia stepped onto the porch, keeping the blanket wrapped around her like armor. I noticed she deliberately positioned herself so the Dr. Frame remained between her and John. "You need to go home," she told him, her voice steadier than I expected. John's demeanor changed instantly, his anger dissolving into a practiced contrition. "Baby, I'm so sorry about last night. I was upset. I'd had a few drinks. You know I would never hurt you." Mia's gaze dropped to the fading bruises on her wrist, visible where the blanket had slipped. "But you did hurt me, John." "That was an accident," he protested, reaching for her hand. She stepped back out of his reach. "Was lying to me about my mother arranging our honeymoon an accident too? Or trying to access the travel fund without telling me?" His expression hardened. "Your mother has been poisoning you against me. One night with her, and suddenly you're believing all sorts of things." "My mother showed me the confirmation emails for the canceled tickets," Mia said. "And the bank manager? Confirmed you tried to withdraw from the fund 3 weeks ago. Were you ever going to tell me about the honeymoon, or were you just going to take the money?" John's face flushed dark red. "I was protecting you. Your mother was trying to control you with her money, like she always has." I bit my tongue, letting Mia fight her own battle. "My mother," Mia said slowly, "has never tried to control me with money. She's only ever given, never taken." She took a deep breath. "Unlike you." "What is that supposed to mean?" John demanded. "It means I found the mortgage papers," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ones you took out on my condo. The one I owned outright before we got married." Couldn't stop my sharp intake of breath. The condo had been Mia's greatest achievement, purchased with her own savings from years of work, her declaration of independence. She'd been so proud of owning her home debt-free. John's expression morphed into something ugly. "We're married. What's yours is mine. I needed capital for investments that will benefit both of us." "Investments like gambling debts?" Mia asked quietly. "I found those papers too, John. The markers from the casino in Atlantic City. The loan from someone named Vince, who doesn't seem to have a last name or an official business." For a moment, I thought John might lunge at her. His hands curled into fists, and he took a half-step forward before seeming to remember where he was. "On my front porch, in full view of the neighborhood." "You had no right to go through my private papers," he said, his voice dangerously low. "They were in my desk," Mia replied simply. "In my home." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Finally, John straightened, adjusting his rumpled shirt in a futile attempt to regain some dignity. "You're upset. We both are. Let's go home and talk about this rationally." Mia shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere with you. Not today, maybe. Not ever." "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "We've been married for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of lies," Mia said. "Starting with excluding my mother from our wedding because you were afraid she'd see through you." His gaze flicked to me, hatred burning in his eyes. "This is your doing." "No," I said calmly. "This is your doing, John. Every bit of it." He turned, back to Mia, his expression softening into what I assumed was his most persuasive look. "Baby, please. Everyone makes mistakes. I love you. We can work this out." For a heartbreaking moment, I saw Mia waver. I recognized the expression on her face, the desperate hope that maybe this time the apology was real, that maybe love could conquer all. I'd worn that same expression during the final years of my marriage to her father, before his death made the decision for me. "Mia," I said softly, not wanting to overstep but unable to stay silent. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Take some time. Think clearly." John's head snapped toward me. "Stay out of this. This is between me and my wife." "She's my daughter," I said evenly. "And she's hurting. That makes it my business." He let out a bitter laugh. "Your daughter? The one you couldn't be bothered to raise properly? The one who grew up embarrassed by her pathetic, controlling mother?" I felt the barb land, but before I could respond, Mia stepped forward. "Don't you dare talk to her like that," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "My mother worked herself to exhaustion raising me alone after my father died. She sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. She sold her mother's house to give us a honeymoon I didn't even know about." Her voice broke. "And I repaid her by letting you convince me she wasn't good enough for our wedding." The raw pain in her voice made my heart contract. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her it was okay, that I understood. But this was her moment, her stand to take. John stared at her, seeming to realize he'd miscalculated badly. "Mia, I didn't mean—" "I think you should leave now," she interrupted, her voice suddenly calm. "My lawyer will be in touch about annulment proceedings." His face contorted with rage. "You can't annul this marriage. You have no grounds." "Fraud is grounds in most states," I interjected mildly. "And lying about your financial situation to enter a marriage certainly qualifies as fraud." John's gaze swung between us, calculation replacing anger as he seemed to grasp the full extent of his predicament. Finally, he stepped back. "Fine. Take some time to cool off. But remember, Mia, you signed those mortgage papers too. Your credit is tied to mine now. Think carefully about your next move." With that final threat, he turned and stalked to his car. We watched in silence as he drove away, tires squealing against the asphalt. When he was gone, Mia's shoulders slumped. I gently guided her back inside, closing and locking the door behind us. "Did I really sign mortgage papers?" she asked, in a small voice as we sat at my kitchen table. I squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out. I promise." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with remorse. "Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For the wedding. For believing him over you, for—" I held up a hand to stop her. "We have plenty of time to talk about all of that. Right now, I just want you to know that you're safe here, and that I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Mia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know what happens next." "Neither do I admitted. "But we'll figure it out together." 1 year later, I stood on the porch of my new cottage, watching waves crash against the shoreline less than 100 yards away. The Cape Cod breeze tugged at my hair, carrying the scent of salt and late summer roses. Behind me, the small cottage gleamed with fresh paint, its blue shutters and white trim exactly as I'd envisioned when I first saw the property. After decades of putting everyone else first, I had finally done something purely for myself. Purchased this small piece of heaven with the money I'd originally set aside for Mia's honeymoon. The irony wasn't lost on me. What had been intended as a gift for my daughter's new life had instead become the foundation for my own. "The deck furniture is here," Elaine called from inside. She'd driven up with me from the city, helping to transform the cottage from a neglected rental into a proper home. "Should we set it up now or wait until morning?" "Let's wait," I called back. "I want to catch the sunset." As if on cue, the sky began to shift from clear blue to the brilliant oranges and pinks of a perfect coastal sunset. I settled into the old Adirondack chair I'd found at a yard sale and refinished myself, savoring the moment. This past year had been one of the most difficult of my life, but also, unexpectedly, one of the most rewarding. The annulment proceedings had been messy, with John fighting every step of the way until evidence of his financial deceptions became too overwhelming to ignore. His careful facade had crumbled quickly once investigators started digging into his affairs. Mia had moved in with me for 3 months after that confrontation on my porch. Those months had been a delicate dance of rebuilding trust, of honest conversations that sometimes lasted late into the night. We cried together, laughed together, and slowly found our way back to the relationship we'd had before John entered our lives. It hadn't been easy. There were days when old hurts resurfaced, when the memory of being excluded from her wedding still stung sharply. There were moments when Mia's shame over how she'd treated me made her withdraw, convinced she didn't deserve forgiveness. But we persevered. Because that's what family does. Real family. Not the glossy, status-conscious version John and his parents had tried to sell her. The sound of tires on gravel drew my attention. A small blue sedan pulled into the driveway, and my heart lifted at the sight. Mia stepped out, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking more like herself than she had in years. "You made it," I called, rising to meet her. "Sorry I'm late," she said, hugging me tightly. "The closing took forever, but it's done. The condo is officially sold." After months of legal wrangling, Mia had managed to extricate herself from the mortgage John had taken out against her condo. The sale represented the final severing of financial ties between them, the last step in moving forward. "How do you feel?" I asked as we walked toward the porch. She considered the question, her expression thoughtful. "Lighter. Like I can finally breathe again." She glanced at me. "Is that how you felt when you bought this place?" I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "There's something powerful about making a decision solely for yourself, isn't there?" "I'm still getting used to it," she admitted. Inside, Elaine had set out a simple dinner of clam chowder and fresh bread from the local bakery. As we settled, around the small dining table, the conversation flowed easily among the three of us, punctuated by laughter that felt healing in its normalcy. After dinner, Elaine excused herself to call her husband, leaving Mia and me alone at the table with our cups of tea. "I have something for you," I said, rising to retrieve a small gift-wrapped box from the sideboard. "A housewarming gift of sorts." Mia accepted it with a questioning look. "But you don't even know where I'm going to live yet. I haven't decided if I'm staying in the city or moving closer to the school." She'd recently accepted a position teaching art at an elementary school, rediscovering her passion for creativity that had been dormant during her relationship with John. "Open it," I encouraged. She unwrapped the small box carefully, lifting the lid to reveal a key attached to a silver dolphin keychain, a nod to her childhood love of marine life. "Mom?" she questioned, looking up at me with confusion. "It's a key to the cottage," I explained. "I want you to feel like this is your home too. Whenever you need a break, whenever you want to visit, planned or unplanned, you're always welcome here." Tears welled in her eyes. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," I said firmly. "Mia, this year has taught me that love isn't about keeping score. It's not about who deserves what. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Maybe especially when it's hard." She cradled the key in her palm as if it were infinitely precious. "I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling guilty about the wedding, about shutting you out when I should have trusted you the most." "I hope you do stop feeling guilty. Eventually," I said gently. "Not because what happened didn't hurt. It did. But because carrying that weight forever won't help either of us move forward." Mia nodded slowly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said months ago, about John finding the cracks in our relationship and widening them, about how those cracks were already there before he came along." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I think I always resented how hard you worked when I was growing up," she admitted. "I saw other mothers volunteering at school, attending every event, and I felt less important somehow. I didn't understand the sacrifices you were making just to keep our lives stable." "I wish I'd found a better balance," I acknowledged. "There were times I was so focused on providing for you that I forgot to be present with you." "But that's just it," Mia said earnestly. "You were doing your best in an impossible situation, and instead of appreciating that as I got older, I let John convince me that you weren't good enough." She shook her head, self-recrimination clear in her expression. "How could I have been so blind?" "Because he was telling you what part of you wanted to hear," I said simply. "We all have vulnerabilities, Mia. The right person, or the wrong person, can tap into them with frightening precision." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of waves against the shore filling the cottage. Finally, Mia reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package of her own. "I brought something for you, too," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's not much, but—" I unwrapped it carefully, my breath catching when I saw what was inside. A beautiful, silver picture frame containing a photograph of the two of us from last Christmas. We were sitting on my old couch, heads tilted together, laughing at something Elaine had said behind the camera. It was completely natural, unposed, a genuine moment of connection captured by chance. "It's my favorite picture of us," Mia said, softly. "I thought maybe you could put it here, in your new home." "It's perfect," I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. Later that evening, as darkness settled over the cottage, Mia and I stepped out onto the porch. The night was warm, stars emerging in the clear sky, the steady rhythm of the waves a soothing backdrop. Without a word, Mia extended her hand to me. "What are you doing?" I asked, smiling as I took it. "Remember how you used to dance with me in the living room when I was little?" she said. "After Dad died, when I'd have nightmares, you'd put on that old Ella Fitzgerald record, and we'd dance until I forgot to be scared." I nodded, the memory washing over me with unexpected clarity, Mia's small hand in mine, her little feet balanced on top of my slippers as we swayed to the music. "Dance with me now?" she asked. There was no music except the natural symphony of waves and wind, but as we began to move together in a simple, swaying dance on the moonlit porch, I realized this was what healing truly felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something new and beautiful growing from the broken places. "Mom?" Mia whispered as we danced. "Hmm?" "Thank you for not giving up on me." I pulled back slightly to see her face, illuminated by the soft porch light and the glow of the rising moon. "I'll never give up on you, Mia. That's not what mothers do." We continued our dance, two women who had weathered a storm and found their way back to each other. The past year had taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't grand sacrifice or dramatic gestures, but the quiet persistence of showing up, day after day, offering second chances and creating space for healing. As we danced on the porch of my seaside cottage, our cottage now, I realized that this moment, this simple connection, was worth more than any wedding I could have attended. This was our last dance, but also our first, the beginning of a new chapter written on our own terms, defined by mutual respect and genuine love rather than obligation or appearance. And as the ocean waves kept their steady rhythm against the shore, I held my daughter close and silently thanked the universe for bringing us here, not just to this place, but to this moment of authentic connection that no one could ever take away.